Okay, so we're going to be doing a 1 point room for our 1 point perspective final, and I set this up. I gridded it out. Everything is measured by the foot, so this is about as accurate as it can be for the lesson plan. So I laid out everything for you, and what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a window, adding a bed, a table. We're going to be adding a bookcase, a door, a desk, and a screen. And then if you want, we can add additional stuff like lamps, computer, anything else that could fill out the room. And what this is going to be is this is going to be our underdrawing. So an underdrawing is where you have everything laid out. You have your guidelines. You're going to see the eraser marks. Everything's going to be very blocky in shape. And then what happens is you either take this to a light table or use a piece of vellum over it, and then you draw on top of it. So you round out the beds, you add curtains, you add books, you add details, and that is your overdrawing. So before you can do that, we have to have everything laid out, and that's what we're going to be doing in 1 point perspective. Um, so with this video, I've sped it up 2 times the speed. I can't go a lot faster than that because then people won't be able to follow. The other thing is this is going to be a long video. It's going to be over 30 minutes. This is taught over generally over a 3 day period. So this is about a 3 hour assignment. And that takes into account that people will figure this out at different rates. Now, if I didn't set everything up, you're going to see a lot of inconsistencies. You'll see a lot of errors, and you could took a 3 day assignment and it'll turn into a 4, 5, 6 day assignment simply because you're going to be spending a lot of time fixing errors. So this way we can understand it easily and we can follow along and we're going to have consistency. So we're going to begin the video right now. I am doing this in Illustrator because I can zoom in and out so you guys can see it. I can color code. I can take off the excess guides. In reality, what you're going to be doing is any guides that get in your way, you're going to erase them. And then the important thing to understand is that all your guidelines need to be super light. Okay, so in this, what we're doing, we're starting off with the bed and we are going to all the points. And we're doing a platform bed where the mattress sits inside the platform. And then we're going to be adding a headboard to the back of this. And once you have all your guides, you're going to go close to the wall, but not all the way to the wall. So you got to think your bed's going to be 6 to 7 inches off the wall. And then we're going to go up. We're going to also move up slightly because we have to give ourselves enough room to do the headboard, which also has its own thickness. So when we start and end the bed, we want to end the bed closer to a foot away from the wall. So you want to have some distance, and then we'll lay in the headboard. Once we have the headboard laid in, we have to add our vanishing points. And sorry, excuse that part. And you have to remember everything has a height, width, and depth. So we have to keep that in mind every time we're laying something out in perspective. So all of our lines that are facing us are going to be horizontal and vertical. And then everything going away from us is going to the vanishing point, and it is going to be in linear perspective. So what I'm doing right now is adding the legs. And what's important is uh, you try to keep these as uniform as possible. So you don't want one skinny leg and one fat leg because in reality, they're going to be the exact same size. And then once we have those laid out, again, they need to go back to the vanishing point. And the one thing you'll notice is I have to correct a lot of the placements in the video. And that's because it's hard to be extraordinarily accurate in doing this in Illustrator. It's much easier just to line up a ruler and do it. The advantages is I can make my guidelines disappear anytime I want to, and I can build my shapes a lot faster than doing it by hand. So everything that is black is going to be a dark line. Okay, so you want to make sure, I would suggest doing, if you don't have good control, using a 2H or 4H pencil to do your guidelines, and then using an HB or a 2B pencil to do all your dark lines. So now that we have everything laid out, we have to build it. So what we're going to do is we're only going to add the black lines or the thicker lines to the parts of the bed that we need. Now, here's what I'm talking about. I have to zoom in a lot of times to make my adjustments, and this is just doing the posts. So again, all of our lines that are horizontal go straight across. All of our lines that are vertical go straight up and down. All other lines have to go onto the guideline. Now, even at just moving this at 2 times the speed, it's going very, very fast. So my suggestion would be pause it as you need it, take time, look at it, digest it, and then do it yourself. And like I said and showed right now, it's a lot easier for me to make shapes really quickly. In real life, you'd have to draw 4 lines with that ruler to do that. This I can do much quicker. But as far as accuracy and speed, ruler and paper is faster, but it's also a little bit messier. So now I just put in the bottom frame. So this is a post bed, right? And inside of that frame sits the mattress. So you're not going to see like this big round mattress sticking out because it's, recessed inside of that post. And the other thing I mentioned earlier is everything's going to be very blocky and square. So in reality, our beds are rounded. And that's what you do with phase 2 of this. So when you're doing the overdrawing, you're going to be tracing this, but when you trace it, those harsh corners, you're going to round those out. Um, and then you'll add stuff like pillows and sheets onto the bed. So now we're doing the headboard. Other thing to keep in mind, everything that is below the horizon line, that's where the red dot is, that's your vanishing point. So everything below the horizon line, you're going to see the top of an object. Okay. So that bedpost and the header, that is below the horizon line. So it has to have some kind of thickness on top. And for your drawing, it might just be you do a thick line, right? You just make that line a little bit fat line, and that's going to represent the depth of that head. And again, this is what I was talking about with Illustrator. For me to be accurate, you have to go in and you have to make all these little adjustments. So that's one of the things that can be time consuming. So now the bed is finished and we're going to move on to the window. So this is what I like to do for day one. Day one, I like to get the bed and the window taken completed, and then the next day work on um, the coffee table, or the side table, I should say, the bedside table, and the bookcase. So here we're going to do the window. The window seems easy, except windows are not going to be flat. You have a wall, and that wall has a thickness. So the typical thickness of a wall going to the exterior is going to be anywhere from, uh, 8 to 10 inches thickness. So you have to keep that in mind that you're not just drawing a flat rectangle shape or trapezoid shape along the wall. You have to show the recess, right? So if you go to any window, you're going to see the recess of the wall because the window is going to be more towards the exterior. So you have to account for that. So that rectangle that is drawn on where the window's going, that represents the thickness of the wall. And the top of that is above the horizon line. So you're going to see the thickness of the top. And then the bottom part is closer to the horizon line, but not quite at the horizon line. So it's going to appear much thinner. And the reason I drew the guidelines through the window shape is because I need to know where the other side of the wall is, the thickness. So this is what I'm doing now. You are not going to keep this part. This is going to part be erased, but I need that other corner that's going to be hidden from view. And that's the top upper left-hand corner of this pink dashed rectangle. And that is going to show me where the center of this window is. So in order to find that, you go from one end to the other. And again, we're going to the back of the wall, the recess part of the wall, not the front of the wall. So this is the center of the window as it's recessed towards the exterior versus the interior. So that's why we need that other rectangle in there, even though we're not going to be able to see, the other side of that wall. So I hope that made sense. And then we are going to line this up and we're going to put in our glass framing. Okay. Another thing to keep in mind, the glass framing, it's not flat either, right? So that glass is sitting in something that has a thickness to it. So we have to incorporate that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw in the parts of the frame that are facing us. So that's going to be the height and width, but we still need to add the depth. Okay, now, so there's the depth of the frame going down. And then I'm going to need another one going to the vanishing point. And you can see, in reality, this is going to be kind of just a thicker line. If you sharpen your pencil really sharp, you can draw two lines and you'll be able to clearly see them both. And now that this is laid out, we're going to do the same thing we did with the bed. We're going to go in, we're going to add our dark lines. So these are the lines that we are going to keep. Remember, the guidelines we do not keep. And the parts that we're going to keep. So we see the recess of the wall, so we're going to keep that. We see the underside of the wall where the window is. We don't see the other side of the wall facing us, right? So these are the three parts of the window opening that you're going to see. And this is why I use Illustrator, because I can zoom in and zoom out. Uh, it makes it visually a lot easier to follow. And this is a fairly simple exercise. That will, if you can figure this out and you understand it and you put time and effort into it, this will give you the foundation knowledge to do much more complex three-dimensional drawings. So I do this because it's teachable. It has a lot of uh, tips and tricks that you're going to use that you can uh, apply towards more complex illustrations. But at the same time, this isn't overwhelming. So you have to think about, and sometimes I always suggest that people go look at a window. Okay. So you're not going to get that crisscross pattern. Usually you're going to have one of those be solid and the other two broken up. I'm talking about the framing for the window. Now, if your lines are slightly off, you could fix them right then and there with an eraser. If they're close enough, you can fix them in the overdrawing, the secondary drawing that you do, which I'm also going to show you. Okay, so this would be day 2, and we're going to be doing the coffee table. So that coffee table is right in the middle of the room. You can see the vanishing point. Again, the horizon line goes through that vanishing point. One thing I'd like to mention right now, and I should have done it earlier, anytime I don't need to draw a guideline all the way through, I don't. So in this case, I have to draw my guidelines, and I'm showing how the top of the bed and the top of the table, the rear part, line up together. So you would just take your ruler and line it up with the bed, and that gives you the back side of the table. But those guidelines going through the table, where the legs go, I could just draw those guidelines until it hits the shape. Once the guidelines hit the shape, I can just stop right there. The important thing is to make sure that your ruler is in fact lined up to your vanishing point. So when I put these in, you'll see what I'm talking about. So there's the leg, there's the leg. Now the blue line, I really only need to draw it to where it hits the base shape of the table. That's it. That's all you really need to draw. So as we move forward, I'm going to be talking about where you don't have to draw that guideline through the object. You can simply stop it, and you'll see it when we do the desk, because otherwise those lines are just going to interfere with everything that you've drawn, and it'll be very, very confusing. So part of this process is also learning how far back do you need to extend the guideline. The most important thing is that your ruler is lining up from the point you're drawing to the vanishing point, which is that red dot. And then these are just some of the little details that you can add, right? So we're just putting in a drawer to that side table. And that table is done. So the next thing we're going to be moving on to is we're going to be moving on to the bookshelf. One thing I do recommend, if you know you're going to draw something, make sure you have some kind of reference for it, so you're just not drawing it completely out of your head. When I'm doing this, I'm looking at my bookshelf that is directly to the right of me. Because you'll forget little things. Like for one, the bottom of the bookcase is going to be thicker than the top of the bookcase. It's going to be weighted down. So you want to have that to be a little bit thicker. It's not going to be as thin as it is on the top. Once I have that stuff in, then I can start adding my guidelines. Okay, and again, going top and bottom. And you can see where the wall is indicated lightly in gray. So that bookcase can't go farther than that. So you want to make sure you don't draw into the wall. And then here's two more guidelines that I'm drawing that you really don't need. Um, you don't need to have those going all the way through. But in Illustrator, I don't have a choice. You have a ruler. You can decide how far back you want to have them go. Okay, so now we're going to draw this. Now here's the important part. You got to make sure it does not go into the wall. So that dot, that point, that corner cannot go higher. Okay, so right now I'm saying this is right up against the wall. It can't go higher than that gray line. And then I'm putting in the bottom using that guideline. And I'm going to put in the top using the same guideline. So there's my back corner. So that's going to be the back of my bookcase. So everything has to relate. So I'm using that back corner of the bookcase. That's going to establish how far back that shelving goes. And I did the same thing with the bottom. And now you have the 2 points that will show you where the back of the case goes on the right hand side. But we're not going to draw that because we're going to be putting shelves in. Okay, and that's just my guideline. And you can see I'm a little bit off on one of my measurements, so I have to make some adjustments in here. Uh, the more accurate you are, the less adjustments you have to make. And then now that I made my slight adjustments, everything's pretty much accurate. Now that guideline, again, is a very, very, very light line, but it is not something you need to really draw because you can simply use your ruler. So I'm going to put in my shelves, and again, I'm looking at a bookcase. So the bottom shelf is going to be taller than the other shelves because I'm going to put the bigger books underneath there, the heavier books. And then the other shelves are going to be spaced closer together, and they're going to have the smaller books on it. So anytime I do something like this, I try to base it as much as possible on reality because that is something else that adds to the readability of doing something like this perspective. So if it looks more like what you would expect in reality, people will buy into it more. And these are simple rectangles. So these are just each 2 lines going straight across. You want to keep their thicknesses consistent. And I suppose I should say this now, and I'll say it at the end of this. It's better to use a transparent ruler than a solid ruler, like a solid metal ruler or a solid wooden ruler. You'd want to use like a clear transparent ruler if you have the ability to have one, because it makes it much easier to do this. Okay, so both of those shells are above the horizon line, but they're not extraordinarily above. And so you're not going to see the top of it. Now, what I probably should have done, and I think I forgot to do it, is you could probably see a little bit of the underside, but not too much. You can literally just thicken the line below those top two shelves. Um, the very top shelf might have had enough to see, but I think I forgot to do that. And this happens sometimes. So the three bottom shelves, so the base, the first shelf going up, the second shelf, you're going to see the top of it because it's below the horizon line. Now you're not going to see much, so you can see how little of it you're going to see, and then you'll see a little bit more, and then you see a little bit more below it. So the farther away you get away from the vanishing point, the more and more you're going to see, or I should say, the farther away you get from the horizon line, the more and more you're going to see in the top of the shelves. And again, the two shelves above, you should be able to see underneath the very top one, but it's not going to be much. And that's it. That's the shelving. So that would be the end of day 2. And now we're going to be moving to day 3, where we're going to put the desk in, we're going to put the monitor in, and we're going to put in the door. The 2 dots that I have there, those are your markers. So that tells you how far back you're going to go. So in reality, this guideline right there, you can stop that guideline right where that dot is. You don't need to go farther than that. Same thing with the other guidelines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to block these off, but I'm still going to show them hitting the point. And the reason I'm doing this A is to make it visually clear. Um, but I want you to see that those lines are all hitting that vanishing point. And now again, going straight up and straight across. Okay. So that's really important. You got to make sure those lines are straight up and straight across. And then going back to the screen. And you'll see the screen's probably a little bit more complicated than you thought. How wide you want to make the screen, that's up to you. I just try to get a good, nice rectangle. I don't want a square. And then this is going to be for the actual screen. And then once I have those guides put in, I can insert the screen inside of that monitor. Now this is for the top of the desk. And then I'm going to put in the sides. Now the side closer to you should be thicker than the side going away from you. So as things recede into the backdrop, they're going to appear skinnier, right? So that one needs to be slightly wider than the one that's going into the background. They can't be the same. And then the back one definitely cannot be thicker than the one in the front. So I'm going to be adding some shelving and drawers, I should say, into this. And again, I'll reiterate this because I want to make sure everyone gets it. All lines going up need to go straight up vertically. They should not be tilted. And all lines going across should be directly across. So that should be a 90-degree angle. And then I'm going to add the bottom board. So this is where it helps. If you're not sure of how you're going to do a desk, look at a picture of a desk. There's a lot of different types out there, but you want to make sure you get all the parts correctly because that really seals the deal when it comes to how accurate this is going to be. And now we're just adding all our dark lines. Okay, so there's the top of the desk. Now, I don't know if I did, but you could add like a little drawer up there, like a skinny drawer for pens and whatnot and notes. These are going to be the cabinets. And this is a prime example of why you don't need to draw your guidelines all the way to the vanishing point. Because if you did that, you'd have all those lines going through the bookcase, which would make it very, very difficult to read the bookcase when you do your next drawing on top of this. So anytime you can eliminate lines, you want to do it. So when you're doing the desk, again, line up your ruler to the vanishing point, but do not draw your lines all the way to the vanishing point because you won't need them. You see where the point is for the door. You can stop all your lines short. And then the nice thing about this, if you get the main parts of the desk correct, and later on you're like, oh, I missed something, it's really easy to add and fix at this phase because this isn't going to be your final, right? This is the underdrawing. This is your prep for your final. This is getting everything put into place accurately. And then what I'm doing now is I'm just putting a drawer in. So now we're going to move to the screen. You'll notice I didn't do the top of the desk. You don't want to do the top of the desk until after you get the screen done. Because you're going to see that we're going to have to add a base to the screen to sit onto the desk. And uh, it's just easier to do that first and then finish the top of the desk afterwards. And then hopefully by now you understand why this took a little bit over an hour to do. Um, Normally if I had a tutorial, I might speed this up 4 times the speed, but if I sped it up that fast, there's no way people would be able to follow along. So this is only at 2 times the speed. That's why it's a longer video. I still suggest pausing it and looking at it and understanding. And you're going to see we're doing the same thing that we did with the window to find the center of the screen. So I know where that center of the screen is. And you might be asking, why do we need to know where the center of the screen is? Well, in this case, I am putting the stand in the middle. You could put the stands on the left and the right, but I decided just to do a stand in the middle of the screen. And you're seeing right now why this can take a little bit longer doing it digitally in Illustrator than it would be by hand. I wouldn't have to make all those adjustments. I'd simply just draw it. And then you want to make sure everything appears to be going back into space, even the base. So I want to make sure that that base still looks like it's going through. And now I'm going to complete that line, and then I got to make my adjustments. So when you're using a ruler, you're just not going to draw through the objects. Illustrator, I don't have a choice. So I'll draw through an object and hide it. Okay, and again, I'm showing you don't want those lines going all the way through. So once we have that done, we're going to do the door. And again, there's no point in drawing these guidelines all the way through to the vanishing point. You can simply stop to where the door ends, and then just darken those lines. So we don't have that option digitally. You have that option by hand. I'm going to block it off again so you can see what I'm talking about. So you don't need those guidelines going all the way through to the bookshelf. Just draw them as far as you need it. The important thing is that you're lining everything up with that vanishing point. Also, don't draw through the desk either. It's the door's going to visually it's going to stop when you hit the desk. So there's no need to really draw that line past the desk. It's just going to create more visual clutter. So now we're going to put in the frame for the door. Again, the mistake people make a lot of times is they'll just draw a rectangle, put a little circle in there for the doorknob, and say, "Here's a door," and it's like, "Well, where's your frame?" The door is not just a hole in the wall. There's framing going on. So when you're doing something like this, you want to make sure that you're indicating that frame, and then you can make this next level if you want to. You could have the door opening in perspective, which would be, you know, much harder than just doing it door closed. So that's something that would be more advanced. The other thing I want to mention is if you want to get better at drawing perspective, we're very limited in what we do in class. But if you want to get better in perspective, you would take a drafting class. In a drafting class, you'd spend an entire year drawing things in perspective, and you'd learn about different grids, different angles, way more information than what you're going to be getting out of these. This is like basic fundamentals, basic introductions. The purpose of these exercise is to give you an understanding of how this works. So when you want to try to do something harder, you have a solid foundation. But again, this is very, very intro to linear perspective, and this is about as complicated as I will get in the classroom. And again, when you're doing this, if you forget details, you can go back and add them. So right now I'm just adding a little bit extra. And when we pull out of this, we have a window, we have a bed, we have a bedside table, a bookshelf, we have a door, a desk, and a screen. Things that we're missing: we don't have a chair for the computer desk. We don't have a computer for the desk. We don't have things like lamps. We don't have things on the wall like posters or pictures. Um, I don't have anything drawn past the bed. We could add a dresser, right? Coming towards us. That's something I've done in the past. And then right now I'm just adding the walls in. So the walls is something that I add in last because look how little of the bottom wall you see. You see a little bit between the table. You see a little bit of between the table and the bookcase. And then you see a little bit between the bookcase and the sidewall. So you You don't want to draw that back wall till the very, very end because you're going to find you're not drawing a lot of it. Same thing with the walls from the side. Again, just line up your ruler to that bottom corner, and you can draw the wall to the left, and then you can do the same thing to the right, but you're seeing very, very, very little bit of the wall. So on the right hand side, you're really just seeing it between the door and then right past the desk, and that's it. And I'm again making my adjustments because my lines were off. Now, if I put a computer, let's say sitting next to on the ground next to the desk, I wouldn't see the bottom wall at all, past the desk. The only part of the bottom wall I would see is right by the door. Um, so lining it up, there's the back side of the wall. You could add a wastebasket there. You could add a lot of different things there that you would not see. And then I got to do the other side. And again, I'm going through that corner, right? So you can see that corner that's faded, my first indicator of where the wall is. And there you have it. You have your wall to the left, the back wall to the right. We're looking through the fourth wall, and then we have the floor and the ceiling. And then this is what I'm talking about. You can just go ahead and, add stuff. This is going to be pictures. Um, you can add quick guidelines and do stuff on the wall. And then again, these guidelines are not guides you'd have to draw all the way to the vanishing point. You would just draw them before they hit the door. I wouldn't even go close to the door because again, you want to get rid of that clutter and you'd like to be able to erase the excess. And then you need guidelines for anything that's going to be on the left or right side of the wall. You need guidelines because those also have to go back into perspective. Now, you could fast forward, you could stop the video at this point. You can go to the end because I'm going to show you the end product at the very end of the video. But this is just framing this in, and there's some errors, so going to have to quickly go ahead and fix those. But this is adding those little extra elements. So when you really want to sell this, I would advise laying this out in this part of the drawing versus waiting for the over part. Because you do need guidelines and you do want to make sure that the guidelines are accurate. And, that's what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to make things as accurate as possible. And you can see when you're just slightly off like that upper right picture, you can see that the backside of the picture is kind of dipping a little bit too low. So those are things that you want to catch and you want to see and you want to fix. So it looks like I forgot to fix that upper corner in that picture. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. So it's good to see how just like a little variation can throw things off. In this case, I'm going to be putting in a rug. And after doing the rug initially, I didn't like the length of it, so I'm going to make it smaller. Now, this stuff's easy because it's flat. So adding something like pictures on a wall, they're going to be flat. Adding the rug in, it's going to be fairly flat. And then if you want to add some thickness to like the picture frames and whatnot, you just add a slightly thicker line to one side, and that'd be the side facing you. Um, and then that'll give the illusion of it being three-dimensional. You also want to make sure that you keep the fact that as objects are closer to you, they're going to be wider or thicker, and then as objects are farther away from you, they're going to be thinner. So when you look at the carpet, that's a good example, or the rug, I should say, it's a good example of that. Okay, so that is the drawing. I'm going to show you guys what I did afterwards, and um, so I did the overdrawing, and I'm including the overdrawing on top of this. Okay, so this is my last piece of advice before we end this. Uh, Pause the video as needed. Take your time. Again, I did this in one shot, about an hour and 15 minutes. I do this in the classroom over a 3-day period. That doesn't include the overdrawing. The overdrawing I usually give another 2 to 3 days for to add details. Some people want to add color and really flesh it out. So do your best. I'm including the PDF link to this so you can print it out. Everything is accurately laid out, and just work at your own pace. So hopefully you'll have a better understanding of how linear perspective works, how one point perspective works, and I wish you the best of luck.